Welcome to the Korg Triton 201 video. This video is a 201 that is going to focus on using the Triton from a bread and butter sound perspective. We're also going to take a look at drum kits inside of the Triton, of which there are many and some really good drum sounds in here that a lot of producers used in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now, I do recommend watching the Korg Triton 101 video that I did before watching this one, and in addition, an upcoming 301 video will focus a little deeper on sound design within the Triton. Let's go ahead and get started here. And most people are going to use the Triton as a bread and butter sound tool in that they want an electric piano sound, a saxophone sound, or a trumpet sound. And when you think about it, the Triton is sort of a 90s version of Kontakt. Now, this is fairly evident and simple, and we did kind of touch on this in the 101 video, but if I want to find a very specific sound, typically I'll go into program mode, go to browse, and then in my category tabs, I can simply filter to the sound I'm looking for. So if I want an electric keyboard, I go to keyboard, and this will show me all electric keyboard sounds. Or if I want an organ, or a string, a guitar, brass instruments, all the way down to basses, synths. Right, so you can treat this just as a bread and butter sound tool if you're going for that 90s vibe, and it's very easy to just come in, I want an electric piano, load it up, and you're good to roll, right? There's no need to modify anything. Now, if you want to get a little more out of the Triton, something that is fairly common is combining sounds, and that's part of the power in a workstation like the Triton, is being able to create layered sounds using various instruments, so something like an electric piano with a more synthesized sound. An example here is, let's say you want to use an electric piano and a pad sound layered up. And you have a lot of ways to approach this. Now, one way we could do this is simply create two different tracks in our DAW and have an instance of the Triton on each one. And in that first track, I can have my electric piano. And then on the next one, I can have that pad sound. And then I can sequence the same pattern and just play them together. And in the modern DAW age, right, this is a pretty acceptable way to do things. We pretty much have unlimited processing power unless you're using a super old computer. But you can just do it inside the Triton, in my opinion, very quickly, and then save that as a preset. Now, a second way to do this is just simply find a sound that already exists in the browser, right? That's an obvious one as well. This can be a little bit of a pain because it's almost like you're finding a needle in a haystack. So getting to a level of comfortability where you can think of a sound you want and then have the knowledge to go make it in the Triton is going to be very beneficial. So a great way to do this is to just create a combination. And if I go to combi mode and go to browse, I'm going to go to user bank A, and just grab an init combi. And then instead of having those two instances, I can just load both of those programs and do a combi. So in this first program, I'm going to go to my keyboards. I'm going to find that wavetable EP and load it in. I'm going to go to the next program here. I'm going to find that pad sound and load it in. And I will put a little bit of effects on here. And we very simply combined two sounds to create a piano pad. And now, of course, we can save this as a combination preset in the Triton and then quickly just bring it up from the browser in the future. Now, there's also another method to do this, and that's to create this sound on the program level. Now, this is going to be a little more involved, but can also be simple if you just focus on the oscillators. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's explore a little bit how sounds are actually generated in the Korg Triton. And to do this, I'm going to use the wavetable EP patch. And what I did was turned off the second oscillator, and I'm going to turn off all of the effects so that we can get as close as possible to that raw oscillator sound. So what we should have now is just the raw oscillator sound. And what this tells us is an oscillator in the Triton is simply a sample. And in this case, it's a sample of an FM electric piano. So Korg may have sampled this from any FM synth from the time period. For some of the acoustic pianos, they likely sampled a real actual piano. And all these different sounds are, again, just samples. Then we take those samples and we put them through the synthesis engine inside of the Triton. So the filters, the IFX, the MFX, the EQ, the different modulations we can do, and we shape those samples into something tangible. So with this knowledge, you hopefully now understand how at the bottommost level, we're really just dealing with samples inside of the Korg Triton. So what I want to do now is show how we can combine sounds inside of a program. And we're going to do that by coming up with our own piano sound. Now imagine a piano sound that combined the soft sound of an electric piano with the bright attack of like a stage piano. And we're going to do this inside of this program here. So I took the wavetable EP, and I'm going to keep this electric piano sample on the first oscillator here. Then I'm going to come into oscillator, enable the second oscillator. Let's go to that one and let's open the filter up here. And again, we want to combine an EP with an acoustic stage piano. So I'd go into my high oscillator, and this is a list of all the samples or oscillators in the Triton. And I can go to the piano category. Let's get this A piano here. And so I can turn down the volume of the electric piano, increase the volume of the acoustic, and let's just listen to the sample. So we have our two sound sources now. And so from here, we can then go through that process of enabling some effects here. Bring in the volume of that electric piano. And we can do things like pan the acoustic piano right, pan the electric left. And then maybe I drop the volume on the acoustic one. And that is just another way that we can combine sounds on the program level. Now, something else that we can do is just think again back to what we're talking about. We have these raw samples of real instruments. And so if we want to use it as a bread and butter or real instrument tool, we can do that. But because we have this powerful synthesis engine, we can also turn what is an ordinary sound into something a little obscure and unique. And in the Triton, the IFX system contributes greatly to the sound and can really transform any patch we have. And layer that in with the fact that we can again combine traditional samples like a piano with some more obscure samples, synthesis waveforms, so on and so forth. So let's take this piano here, the bright E grand. Pretty simple sound there. And let's go to our effects here. And I'm going to go to IFX2 here. And let's start by doing a wah-wah. And then I'm going to feed this into another IFX slot and do, let's try a chorus. Then Then let's feed that into another IFX slot. And on this one, we can get a little crazy. Maybe we do like a phaser. And I just realized we have a chorus down on MFX1. So let's come back in here and maybe we do a little bit of a phaser. And so in a lot of ways, this is like just using effect pedals with a piano. But then we can go to the next level and just simply change the sound of the second oscillator. And we can look for really anything. We can go for a synth wave here. Let's add a little bit of release and sustain. Not the greatest sound ever, but hopefully again it gives you an idea of the power of taking ordinary samples from ordinary instruments and how you can shape those into some interesting things within the Triton. All right, let's talk drum kits now. The Triton features a bunch of drum kits that function like a sampler where each key on your keyboard is a different drum sound. There are about 79 drum kits in the Triton VST, and it's important to mention that these are not drum programs, but drum kits. And in addition, each hit can be changed and modified from the sound assigned to a specific key, to the effects on that specific sound, to the panning and other characteristics. Now, as you can imagine, this allows you to create your own very custom drum kits within here. So let's take a closer look, and we'll start by finding a drum program. So if we go to Program, go to Browse, and filter by Drums, I select this tricky kit here, for example. This is a drum program that contains a drum kit. It's super important to remember. So there are almost two levels here. There's the oscillator level, which is where the drum kit sounds actually live. And then there's the program level that holds that drum kit within it. This will make more sense as we go in and start to modify an existing drum kit. So in the drum kit here, we have our easy screen from before, and you'll see the oscillator here is set to a drum kit. So if I go to oscillator, we have those three oscillator modes. In drum, we'll set it in drum mode where the oscillator contains a drum kit instead of an individual sample. In this mode, you're going to see this drum kit drop down. And this is where you have the different drum kits that contain the mappings for the sounds. So if I change the drum kit, you'll notice the sounds change, but we're still within the tricky kit program. So super important to remember. Now, these drum kits again contain different sounds on each key. And the way we can change these is come to this drum kit edit, and where it says edit key, click this little icon and it will light up. And then when you press a key on your keyboard, you'll see the name of the key shows up in the box. And then beneath it, you see the sample and some of the settings that are assigned to the key. So if I click this again and then press C3, right, it takes us to the sample assigned to key C3. Now, there's this same concept of a velocity switch with drum kits as well, with your high and low sound. And the easiest way to work with drum kits, in my opinion, is drop that velocity switch to 1. In this way, you will always get that high sound triggering, so you don't have to worry about setting up a low sound as well. Now, if we look on the left-hand side here, we have some high-level program settings. One is the mode, poly versus mono. I recommend keeping it in poly, especially if you're going to play a full drum kit. And in poly, we can trigger multiple keys in overlap and they won't choke each other. Whereas if I had this in mono, everything gets cut off. Now, the next thing to check here is this hold option. This is basically a one-shot mode. I'd recommend having this on so you could just quickly press a key. It will trigger the full sample. If you leave it off, it will cut off the sample when you let off the key. So for drums, I always recommend having hold enabled here. Now, one more piece on the hold is that these settings on the left here apply to all of the drum sounds. Now, if we come back over here, let's come to edit key. And let's work with C4 here, which is a hi-hat here. Let's change our velocity switch all the way down so that high sound will always play. I can increase the volume. I can transpose it. And again, we are editing just the sound on key C4. I can reverse it. I can offset the start. I have some tuning options within there, and then we don't have to worry about this low side. Now, you do have a filter cutoff, resonance, attack, and decay control here, and these work, based on my knowledge, in tandem with the program's filter settings. So the way I understood it is if our filter here has a cutoff at 0, and then we set this to 63, it will basically add 63 to the cutoff on here, if that makes sense. My recommendation, go to that filter on the program, just open it wide up. And then same for these other settings here. Now, if we come above this here in the drum kit edit mode, we have assign here. You don't have to worry about that. That basically says, hey, for this key, we want to assign a sample to it. So when I press that key, it will play a sample. And then you have this exclusive group here, and this basically sets up choke groups. So if I click and move up my mouse, I have 127 groups I could use. And so I could take a sample on B3, put it in exclusive group 1. I could take this sample on C4, put it in exclusive group 1. And these two sounds will now choke each other within that group. Now, what I can also do is for each sound, I can set where I want to send this in terms of effects. So I can have it go to the master. I can have it go to a very specific IFX slot. And then I have these send controls here. And these send controls feed into the two master effects slots. So send 1 goes to Master Effects 1, and then send 2 goes into Master Effects 2. And we'll look a little bit more at effects in just a minute here. Last thing to look at is just panning, and you'll see this Use Drum Kit Pan button here. If I turn this off, the panning will follow whatever is set on the program level. But if I turn it on, it will use this pan control set on the individual sound. So you can pan the sound on C4 left and pan the sound on B3 right. So if you want control over that panning, that's a good way to do that down here at the individual sound level. And final thing to look at here, I didn't mention this earlier, is single trigger. And single trigger deals with hitting the same note multiple times. So if this is turned on and I rapidly press a drum sound, it will cut off the previously pressed note to play the new sound. This is good to just control on the individual sound level, because there may be sounds like a ride cymbal where you do want it to ring out as you trigger new notes. All right, so on our drum kit here, let's go back into the IFX settings. And again, remembering that these are set at the program level. So again, a drum kit exists within a program. The program is a container for that drum kit. So again, settings on the program level can apply to the drum kit as well. So we took a look at panning. Now let's look at IFX here. Now, what we can do is under timbre settings is turn off use drum kit settings. And when we do that, every single sound within here will go through this FX chain. If we want individual control over individual sounds in the drum kit, we need to tick use drum kit settings. And then back in the oscillator section, when we're creating these drum kits, for example, this hi-hat wispy here, I can send this just to IFX1. So it will go to just this compressor and then follow whatever the rest of the chain is. So I can change the sound on here. Or if I go back here, I can send this to just the master. Or any of the other IFX slots. And then what I can also do is again apply a send to these two master effects here. And so let's go back into our IFX. Let's change this to something a little more pronounced. Let's do a delay on MFX1 and then a reverb on MFX2. So delay on 1. And then reverb on 2. So a little confusing initially, but if you just take your time when you go through this, the best thing to remember is enable use drum kit settings, and then on the oscillator level, as you go through each key, you can decide where to send that specific sound based on the effect that you want within here. Now let's go ahead and create a drum kit from scratch. And you could do this by starting from an initialized patch, selecting drum, and building from there. But remember, again, a drum kit exists within a program as a container. And so there is some setup to make sure your amp envelopes are right. That can kind of be a pain in the ass to work with. And so for this one, I would actually just start with a preset, and I would take something like a house kit here, and then just write it to a user bank, call it custom kit. And so once we're in here, we can come into our oscillators, and the first thing I would do personally is just change the drum kit that's within here. So you'll see again, we have all these different kits. Let's load this kit in. And I think it's also important to remember that while a kit has a certain setup of sounds, you can still access every single drum sound within a kit. So if I come into the high sound here, right, I have access to all of the different drum sounds within the Triton, right? So I'm not limited by the kit here. That kit just has a certain collection of sounds set up in different ways. I may start, maybe I do want like a little bit of a dance kit. I'm gonna start on the house kit. And let's say I just want a different bass drum. So click this guy, press C3, come into my high. And then I want to change this clap here. Let's come into claps. Maybe we just search for a clap sound. All right, and let's do that little velocity switch. Right, and we're building out our drum kit from here. So to recap, if you're creating a custom kit, I would recommend starting from a preset drum program. It's just gonna make your life 100 times easier. And then you can always come in, change that drum kit that's assigned to the program as a good starting point. So again, if you're wanting like a hip hop drum kit, right? Or if you're wanting, a drum and bass kit, a house kit, so on and so forth. So we have our kit here. Let's go ahead and just sequence in a little bit of a house beat here. So I'm gonna pull up my sequencer. We wanna do a little bit of a 4 on the floor. What I'm noticing is this clap isn't very loud, so let's come back into the Triton. Let's find it on D#3 and let's just turn up the level. So I hope you found this video pretty useful. Again, really just focusing on using the Triton from that bread and butter sound standpoint, but how you could also then quickly combine sounds to really take hold of what makes the Triton so great. And then we took a peek at drum kits, of which there are a lot of great sounds in here, and these sounds were used on a lot of classic records from the early 2000s, and so I still use these drum kits a ton today. Just really good sounds, typically ready to go. Now, in all fairness, would I spend the time to go through and create a custom kit within the Triton? Probably not. I think it's not worth the effort and time it takes, just because going through one by one is so incredibly slow. However, a lot of these kits are ready to go. They're well put together. But if you wanted to do that, put in the extra work to create your own custom kits within here, now you know how to do that. Also, be on the lookout for a 303 video in the near future, where we'll go a little bit more in depth on the arpeggiator. And then in a future video, we'll also look at some deeper synthesis within the Triton. Thanks for the time, all. Have a good one.